ask about where we are, as somebody who understands military tactics and strategy. So you have the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. That's hundreds of miles away. You have this.
How about 1,300?
How about how far?
How about 1,300?
Is it 1,300? Oh, okay. Where are they? Down by Diego Garcia? I don't know where they are.
Well, that's a big ocean. That's a big ocean.
Yeah. So, but you do have the movement of, as I mentioned, the Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group. They are moving these troops into the region. They're talking about bringing in another 10,000 troops. The war is costing us close to $1 billion a day. There must be heavy incentive to use these forces, use this equipment. I'm going to ask you because you know far more than I do. I can't, given the configuration of the strait, imagine a successful amphibious assault, but I'll let you deal with that. What do you think is coming?
All I can figure, Chris, is that they're posturing to a certain extent, and they're only going to use in the actual execution, perhaps on the flanks they might use some of the other forces just for protection, but they're only going to use a small element, much the way they did in Venezuela, and they're going to go after something that's really key, like that uranium that Ted was talking about. And they know, they have intelligence, they'd have to do this, where it is. And they're going to go after it, and they're going to try to seal it up and extract it. I think that's a fancy dream. I don't see how they're going to do it, no matter how they marshal their forces. Now, on the other side of the coin, not penetrating into Iran in any significant way, but still threatening something extraordinarily valuable to Iran, Kharg Island, might be doable in the sense that your Ospreys might have the legs, they might have the range, they might not have clutch failure over the target and kill the Marines just because they're in an Osprey.
We should say, having spent time with the Marines, that was almost dreaded. That one of the most dreaded aspect of being a Marine was getting on an Osprey. But you can explain.
I had a Marine general actually say to me, I'm not sure what I'd do to a Marine who walked up to the door in a training mission or a combat mission even and said to me, I'm not sure I want to get on that bird because he would have reason to do so. But anyway, they only have about a 350, maybe maximum 400-mile range, and they probably are going to have to loiter in order to get anything off of them and onto Kharg Island. And then they've got to come back and do whatever extraction they're going to do. If they're going to do it that way, maybe they might bring the boat up or Tripoli or something like that and do it with that. But all of that is so fraught with, if Iran really does have the drones that we think they have and does have even more sophisticated missiles along that Persian Gulf, 1,875 miles of terrain that it is, then that's fraught with problems. I mean, you're going to get the Osprey shot down. You're going to get the Marines killed en route. You're going to get them killed while they're landing. And you're going to have a hard time establishing a beachhead, so to speak. I just don't know how they're going to do it. I could see it being done if everything went perfectly and there wasn't as much of an opposition as I'm imagining there is. And if you had some way of suppressing that opposition as you were going in, but I don't see the wherewithal to do that in the way that it would have to be done, and I don't see the timing and the geography contributing to it being done, because it's so difficult. I mean, just take a look at how we got into Iraq for 2 wars. We used probably the world's greatest onward movement facility, certainly in Southwest Asia, that was in Kuwait. And we did 2 wars that way. We flowed the troops in, and they flowed into Iraq, and they did their business in Iraq. They had time and space to get ready to do what they were going to do in Kuwait. Well, Iran hit that. They hit that facility. And the last time I saw it, it was burning. So I don't know that they can use that facility. Now they might could use Kuwait, but then look at the map. Look at where they have to go from Kuwait to get where they got to go. They either go through Basra or that area of Iraq, or they go straight from Kuwait to Kharg, or they come in by some other circuitous way up the Gulf maybe, and they're vulnerable that whole way if what I'm being told about Iran's capacity to defend that terrain is what it is.
Larry, would they be coming in on helicopters? Would they be flying out of Kuwait on helicopters?
Well, no, they'd be the Ospreys. They'd be in the Ospreys. The tilt rotor. It's a helicopter and I could see it happening if everything were exquisitely done and the Iranians were suppressed or don't have the capacity that I'm told they do have. But I can't see it done in the face of that capacity and the difficulty of the mission. I see a lot of deaths. I see a lot of problems. I don't see a Venezuela at all.
Well, the Iranians have batteries all along the coastline, right?
That's what, I met with President Ahmadinejad along with Frank Wisner, just a couple of others, couple of Madeleine Albright's people too, in New York when he was there for the UN General Assembly. And my mission with Ahmadinejad was to convince him, each of us, Tom Pickering, Frank Wisner, me, a couple of others, had a 5-minute spiel for President Ahmadinejad. Mine was to create an Inc-Sea agreement, incidents at sea agreement, like we have with the Soviets, but with the Iranians. So that if we had an incident in the Gulf or in the Strait or in the Northern Arabian Sea or Sea of Oman, we would go immediately to the protocols and not start a war. And one of the things he did when I finished my spiel was he looked at me and he said, "Now, let me ask you a question, Colonel. Iran has 1,875 roughly nautical miles shoreline on the Persian Gulf. The United States has none. What's the problem?" And the big smile, "Why are you there?" And, there's no comeback for that. He's right. It's his sea. It's his territorial water. And why do you need an sea agreement? You need it because of the United States, not because of Iran. But I relate that because he convinced me, as did his advisors with whom I spoke afterwards. He was mostly in Farsi. They were pretty good in English. And his foreign minister was very good in English. They convinced me that shoreline is armed to the teeth. So if that's the case, and wouldn't it be very armed to the teeth around Kharg?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the forbidden island. That's the pressure. That's where 10 super tankers can load simultaneously.
That's 90%, I think, of their oil exports out of Kharg.
Yeah. So,
but all of these islands are small. So once you occupy them, you can just rain ordnance upon your just exposed occupied forces.
Of course, you'd be raining ordnance on Kharg on your own facilities, but who's to say they wouldn't do that? You can always build them back.
Well, the Israelis did that on October 7th. They blew up Erez.
Yeah.
Killed a lot of their own soldiers.
There are pros and cons there. I was talking to an oil man, Gary Vogler, who was our oil man in Iraq for 78 months, worked out of the Iraqi oil ministry. And he told me that the destruction in Bahrain would be extremely complicated if you tried to rebuild that refinery. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about roughly the same kind of facilities in terms of difficulty. It'd be hard to rebuild it if it were completely destroyed. So they wouldn't want to do that, I don't think. But would they do it in order to kick an aggressor off? Probably.